Ladies and gentlemen, this is the portrait of a man who spent a quarter of a century working for other people until the day that proverbial opportunity knocked. When it did, Mr. Sid Eliason of Salt Lake City wasted no time responding. Hello, everyone. This is Jack Douglas. Sid Eliason was born in Snowville, Utah, one of 6 children. When he was only 2 years old, his father passed away, and the childhood years were not easy to take, especially since he was the youngest in the family. After high school and business college, he became a bank teller for 4 years in Utah and California, and then a salesman for a large gypsum company. Well, after 18 years with this company, he found himself bossing 150 salesmen. Well, one day, clear out of the blue, he was offered the chance to buy a rich deposit of gypsum in Utah. All he had to do was get enough partners to pool together a lump sum, borrow still more money from a bank, and walk away from the security he had built after 18 years with the same company. Security not only for himself, but his wife and children. What a decision. Well, Sid Eliason made his decision. He turned his back on security, and in doing so, carved out a new life, a life of sweet success. This is Salt Lake City, the flower of our western deserts and capital of the state of Utah. Each weekday morning at 6:30 a.m., 2 of the city's most prominent citizens meet for breakfast at the Mint Cafe. Mr. Gus Backman, for 31 years the executive secretary of the Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Sid Eliason, a former president of the C of C. They generally discuss the same topics as the day before, are waited on by the same waitress, order the same breakfast, and spend the same 15 minutes in a delicate battle of wits to decide which one will pick up the check. And if Sid lucks out on the toss, it's sure to be a good day at the office. His 3-room office suite in the Kern building, supervised by his secretary, Miss Claire Spur, can hardly be labeled lavish. Yet from this modest office, Sid Eliason operates a growing empire. He's the president and major stockholder of the Williams and Peterson Construction Company of Salt Lake City. Major stockholder of the Bayview Developments, 150 homes in bountiful Utah. This Bayview project, partially designed by Sid Eliason Jr., will include a new Mormon church. The 12-story Charleston apartment building, considered the finest in Salt Lake City, is owned by Sid Eliason, as is the City View Lodge Motel. He's a half-owner of the American Fence Company, one of the giants in the galvanized fence business. He's the 4th largest stockholder and a director of the Surety Life Insurance Company, and a director of numerous corporations and banks, such as Tracy-Collins Trust Company and the Commercial Security Bank in Ogden, Utah. In 1954, Sid Eliason was asked to take over the Western States Refining Company, a company then refining 2,000 barrels of oil daily. The company also had 5 service stations. Now, in just 5 years, Western States, under the control of Sid Eliason, boosted oil refining to 7,000 barrels daily, and today there are 165 service stations, the Beeline service stations in 7 western states. Fill her up, please, says the proud driver of this ancient beauty, a 1923 Model T. Oil, banks, insurance, real estate, not bad for a man who spent almost a quarter of a century working for others. And with good reason, they're mighty proud of Sid in Snowville, Utah, population about 200. Sid's grandparents, Hedrig and Christian Anderson, were Danish immigrants, and among the first of the pioneer Mormon families to settle in Utah. They were married by Brigham Young. Sid's father, August, passed away when the boy was 2. Sid's mother never remarried and lived to the age of 92. And here's Sid at the age of 4 in his one and only Sunday suit. The ranch house where Sid was born is still in the family. Only a small porch and numerous coats of paint were added through the years. Sid remembers the barn only too well. He helped his brothers build it. And this was the church school he attended, no longer in use today. After grade school, the family moved to Brigham City so that Sid could attend high school, Box Elder High School, where he played the drums for the school band, captained the football and basketball teams, also took part in track and baseball. Sid will always remember Mr. Ed Ryan as the man who gave him his first job, selling tickets in a movie theater. After graduation, Sid got a bank job as a teller, and in 1925 married Leota Jensen of Brigham City. Sid was 23, Leota 21, and this was the young couple's first home in Brigham City. Shortly after marriage, the Eliasons moved to Los Angeles, where Sid became a bank teller with the Bank of America. 2 years later, they moved back to Utah and a salesman's job for Sid with the U.S. Gypsum Company, his employer for the next 18 years. And then in 1946, the big chance to buy a huge gypsum deposit and go into business for himself. We asked, did he have any qualms about competing with his former employers?
No, Jack, I don't think I did, for the reason that I had spent 18 years with that company and had given them value received, in my opinion. And I think that the free enterprise system in this country is built up from men who break off from large companies and start businesses of their own. And I had that feeling that it wasn't unjust to them, and it was an opportunity I'd been looking for, and I had the desire to go into business for myself.
Well, apparently, Sid wasn't too concerned about quitting a job he had held for 18 years. But we wondered if the decision hadn't come as a shocking surprise to Mrs. Eliason.
Well, frankly, Jack, I wasn't surprised because I knew that Sid had been thinking of doing this very thing for some time. And I was very happy for him to do it because I knew he would make a success of it.
Mrs. Eliason, were you at all worried about the future, the threat to your security?
No, I knew with Sid's background that he had had so much experience that whatever he did, it would just come out wonderful and be right.
Yes, things did turn out all right. The Eliasons raised 2 children, a daughter 22 and son Sid Jr. on the left, 32. A smart, soft-spoken, hard-working chip off the old block. As one of Utah's outstanding examples of self-made success, Sid is frequently called upon to talk on the subject of opportunity. This was a meeting of 150 high school students who are studying salesmanship. Today's lecture, Success, and later we asked Sid to outline his formula for success.
Well, Jack, I'd have to phrase that in 2 answers. Number 1, I think every man who makes a success has to have the ability to get along with people. And there's only a certain degree of success that you can have on your own by what you can do yourself. Beyond that, you have to have partners, you have to delegate your work, and you have to delegate the authority. Number 2, I think that hard work has a great deal to do with any man's success. Many times I've had people come to me and tell me that I was lucky, and I think maybe I am lucky. But I have one answer to that question, and that is, well, the harder I work, the luckier I am.
Although he has no interest whatsoever in professional politics, Sid is a frequent visitor to the Capitol building. He has known Governor George Clyde for many years, and jokingly says he has come to regret the friendship. For every time that the governor needs work done for free, he calls on business tycoons like Sid Eliason. Sid says he could make more money as a $1 a year man in Washington, and he's probably right. By profession, Governor Clyde is an engineer, and his pet project is the Upper Colorado River Basin Water Project, a project which, in the governor's opinion, holds the key for greater prosperity in the Intermountain region. Now, Sid, said the governor, you're a construction man. And with that, Sid knew that the conversation would cost him a lot of time and expense. The Eliasons live in a small but attractive ranch-style home on the outskirts of Salt Lake City, 2230 Parley Terrace. With their 2 children grown and raising families of their own, the house is more than ample for Sid and Leota. They have no servants of any kind, so that if there are chores to be done, such as picking up the dry cleaning, Sid is always elected. Inside, the house is larger than it appears from the outside. Sid, by the way, has always been a big TV fan and owned a set even before Salt Lake City had a TV station. He just bought it and waited. Here's a picture window with a real picture view, the Wasatch Mountains. The small den is loaded with trophies, and virtually every trophy in these scenes was won by Sid or Leota in golf tournaments. Obviously, they're considered excellent golfers in the senior divisions. Next to golf, Leota's favorite pastime is oil painting, and here in her own backyard, she paints Mount Olympus in the distance. Let's meet the second of the Eliasons' children, Mrs. Jack Turner, and her only child, Terrell Arlene. It would be nice to say that Susan merely stopped by to visit with her mother, but it's a fairly good bet that Mom is being recruited to babysit. By now, though, Leota and Sid are used to it, since Sid Jr. and his wife have 4 children. At every opportunity when the youngsters call, Leota says, I think I'll just take 1 or 2 snapshots. And Sid says that Leota is overdoing this adoring grandparent business. He says that Leota now has 3,416,310 of these 1 or 2 pictures. Sid says, well, never mind. The Eliasons are members of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, better known to most of us as the Mormon Church. They regularly attend the Parley's Ward Church closer to their home, and this particular Sunday was a very special event. With daughter Susan, son-in-law Jack, and baby Terrell Arlene, they look forward to the church ceremony known as the Blessing and Naming Ceremony, performed in the bishop's office. Now, only the men participate, though women may be present. The men, priests of the church, place their hands under the baby while the father recites a prayer. It's a solemn but happy ceremony, identical in purpose to the christening ritual of other branches of the Christian church. Later in the week, Sid Jr.'s house was the gathering place for the whole clan. It was Sid Sr.'s birthday, which one he refused to say, but Leota cheerfully spilled the beans, a very young 57. The cake salutes Sid's golf game, but somebody obviously cheated on the candles. Here's a good close-up of Sid Jr. and his wife, Betsy. Their 4 youngsters are Catherine, 6, Eric, 9, Elizabeth, 7, and Danny, 4. And we're not sure whether Sid is counting the youngsters or the candles. Naturally, there were lots of presents for Grandpa, and the most practical came from 4-year-old Danny, a pair of sunglasses for trips to Palm Springs. In a moment, part 2 of the Sid Eliason story. The story of a man who did not start on the real road to success until after he had spent 22 years working for other people. Now, this intermission on behalf of our sponsors. We're in inclined to think of Utah as a dry, sunshine state, and so it is for much of the year. But winters are rugged, almost as cold as Wyoming and Montana. Winter weekends will often find Sid at the Eliason ranch, in which he has an interest with his brothers. And in this part of the cattle country, an owner also does his part or loses cattle. Sid gets a big chuckle out of watching television westerns in which the cowpokes are always complaining of the heat and dust. Why is it, says Sid, they never show a herd driving through snow and across frozen water? Sid'll take the heat and dust any day. The ranch has at least one compensation, the chance to rev up this propeller-driven sled or snowmobile and rock it over the snow-packed terrain. It almost gives the impression of being able to take off and fly. During the skiing season, Sid and Leota drive to the Alta Ski Lodge and Resort, about 45 minutes from Salt Lake City. The Eliasons used to ski a great deal as recently as a few years ago, but they gave it up for something more strenuous and demanding, babysitting, while Sid Jr. and Betsy enjoy the slopes. Young Sid and his wife just passed us on the ski lift, and here's Senior following with grandson Danny. The scenery is stunning. Those skiers, by the way, are 2,000 feet below. Sid Jr. and Betsy are considered good skiers, but still, they get some free advice from Senior, who always has at least a few opinions on any subject. Our cameraman, Bill Southworth, isn't a slouch on skis either, as these action films indicate. Well, they say it happens to the best of them. X marks the spot. You didn't photograph that, did you? Yes, Betsy, we certainly did. Meanwhile, Danny is still getting an earful from Senior. The New State Duck Club on the outskirts of Salt Lake City is considered one of the finest private clubs of its kind in the United States. Senior and Junior own one half of this double boathouse and shelter. Because the club is so close to the city, it's not uncommon for father and son to hunt in the mornings and work in the afternoons. Otti, the retriever, is the only amateur-trained champion in the country. Sid Jr. began training Otti at 3 months. He's now 2 years old. Now, in the scene that follows this one, look closely and you'll see Senior soapboxing as usual. There he is, gabbing away and just barely in time to get into the act. But he shot wild by a country mile, and it was Junior's bird, retrieved, of course, by Otti. Young Sid has also developed into quite a talker. The two men have a habit of talking at the same time, and the truth is that neither has the faintest idea of what the other is talking about. It'll be roast duck tonight, but for now, cold ham and a glass of milk. Wintertime in Utah isn't all fun, however. It does have its serious side, and as one example, the rabbit roundup. Here, as in other parts of the West and Southwest, jackrabbits constitute a major economic menace. They breed and multiply by the tens of thousands, and farmers are virtually helpless in protecting their crops. So the ranchers and the farmers join hands in these rabbit roundups. This drive netted 2,800 jackrabbits. It's quite a change from jackrabbit roundups to Palm Springs, one of the most popular sunshine playgrounds of the West. And it's a welcome change for the Eliasons when the Utah winter gets too rugged. The Eliasons belong to the Thunderbird Country Club, and they're certainly in good company. Now, Sid's a belter, but if you golfers look closely, you'll notice that Sid heeled this drive. The standard consolation prize at the Thunderbird isn't hard to find. Just pick the grapefruit from any nearby tree. Leota has an unusually slow backswing, and she doesn't hit him far. She'll take, 150 to 170 yards as a very good drive, but she hits him straight, and that's the key to her game. In the senior division, when the drives aren't as long as they used to be, putting becomes the key to a man's game. Sid barely misses his putt, but watch Leota can this 12-footer. Palm Springs famed Racket Club introduces us to the founder and guiding light of the club, Mr. Charles Farrell, better known to hundreds of millions of people throughout the world as the star of screen and television. And those of us who remember Seventh Heaven with Charlie and co-star Janet Gaynor can't help wondering if this fella is ever going to grow old. After the Palm Springs trip, we followed Sid to the National Guard camp at Camp Williams, Utah. Last year, in an effort to strengthen public support for the National Guard program, Sid and a dozen other prominent citizens, including Governor Clyde, were named honorary colonels of the Utah National Guard and were invited to familiarize themselves with the expanding activities of the Guard. This is one of the Guard's newest weapons, a self-propelled 8-inch howitzer capable of firing atomic warheads. The gun, however, is not classified, and we were permitted to take these films. At this point, I think it's safe to say that he leads a full and useful life. This man who spent a quarter of a century waiting for the chance to go out on his own. And the usefulness of this life is far from ended. For example, just recently, Sid and his associates announced the building of a new $3 million gypsum plant near Cody, Wyoming. And now we're en route to Cody for the groundbreaking ceremonies. Cody was named after the great Buffalo Bill, whose body is buried in a mountain tomb near Denver. Sid did himself proud at the groundbreaking ceremony, even though custom requires only a single spade of dirt. A single spade of dirt, soon a $3 million plant, then hundreds of jobs. In Laramie, Wyoming, Sid and his Laramie partner, Mr. Warren Grothy, own a whole block of buildings in the downtown section of the city. Because of its historic Old West tradition, Laramie has always been a favorite locale of Western fiction. And here's the bank that's robbed at least once a day, on television that is, the Bank of Laramie, but a far cry from the old days, as modern and as burglar-proof as any bank anywhere. Sid Eliason built the Oakridge Country Club in Farmington, Utah, and later sold it to the members. But he retained the property surrounding the club, and another of his current projects with Sid Jr. is converting this property into a subdivision of fine homes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with all these new interests and activities, it's impossible to avoid the question of retirement.
I have some very definite thoughts on retirement. Number one, I think probably the word retirement should be taken out of the American dictionary. I think when men retire and they treat themselves as retired men, many of them die younger than they should. And I think a man who has the ability to create businesses, to work and run businesses, should not retire, but should probably ease off his work a little bit and have more leisure time, but continue to have those interests that he likes and things that he can do when he wants to work.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sid Eliason. Periodically, we like to remind you, our audience, that if there are people in your community whose success stories would be of interest to all of us, please feel free to write and tell us about these people. I promise you we'll take it from there. My thanks now again to Mr. and Mrs. Sid Eliason, as always to you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Thank you so much and good night.